We're back. Name brand, off brand, at it again. This time looking at Chris Olave versus Deebo Samuel. Adam, that's your favorite boy. First, we got an intro to hit. Do it, Brian. All right, Adam, name brand, off brand, we got a good one. Deebo Samuel, Chris Olave, a couple guys that you and I have spent years talking about at this point. Good or bad, getting on the train or getting off the train. Do you really think that there's a massive misrepresentation between these two guys? That it really justifies the, 22 spots on keep trade cut between the two wide receivers?
I'll say this. When you look at the names of on keep trade cut, right, I can understand kind of how this happens, especially this time of year. We're in the middle of June, getting ready to even go to July. So we're probably looking at least 6 weeks, I'd say, before you start to see the pendulum kind of swing a little bit away from the youth. But I would say there's at least 4 to 5 names that I would have qualms with that are ahead of Deebo Samuel. And I'm not even the biggest Deebo truther. But the other thing to keep in mind, obviously, is everyone's going to say, well, the age, 23 versus 28. So there's 5 years difference. But Deebo Samuel's contract is going to be pretty hard to get out of for the next 2 years. And when you take a look at their production, especially when you look at points per game, because Deebo has missed some time, I'm not saying Olave is not capable of missing some time. The production standpoint, what these guys were the last 2 years, just looking at points per game last year, wide receiver 13 and wide receiver 20, 16.2 versus 14.5 in points per game, and then 13.2 points per game versus 13 in 2022. Now here's the thing, 2023 last year, Deebo Samuel was actually ahead of Chris Olave in points per game. And basically, when you average out the two, Deebo Samuel's still going to be ahead of him in points per game. So the reality is, with Chris Olave, super talented player, love him, but why would you pay all that extra to have Chris Olave or not try to explore a down tier to Deebo Samuel to get a plus when the quarterback position doesn't look any different? What we really project, even if you say Carr is healthy, what different can you tell me about the situation of Chris Olave that's going to start meaning something in points per game next season? And then if it's not next season, what happens in the following year? When does it come to fruition to where Chris Olave is an elite player like his price is kind of reflective of?
So getting back to some of our best ball roots, just looking at the spike weeks for last year, Chris Olave never had a spike week. Him and Deebo both missed time. Deebo missed 2 games. Chris Olave missed 1. Obviously, they both had a bye week. 2 spike weeks, though, out of Deebo. Wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2. You can't spike too much harder than that. Total number of above average weeks for them, Deebo had 7. Olave had 6. It's weird when you look at point total finish, and this is why I think it's very antiquated to look at fantasy overall finish. You want to look at it from a points per game lens or a WARP perspective. That is my preferred way to do it. Looking at total finish is very antiquated in my opinion, because they both finished right next to each other, 15 and 17, right in the same ballpark. But really, what is the difference when Chris Olave goes out and gives you a wide receiver 49 week versus a Deebo Samuel wide receiver 63 week? How much did that actually help you win your matchup by having a wide receiver in the 40s versus having one in the 60s? Not at all. Doesn't really matter, which is why when you look at WARP for last year, 1.46 for Deebo, wide receiver 12, 1.3 for Chris Olave. And yet, that age, that excitement thing, Deebo's kind of old and crusty and we don't like him and we talk down about him and he's injury prone, the whole thing. Does that really make up for the difference in price? I say not. And if you want to go out and look at some of these trades that have been done for Deebo Samuel, you can get Deebo for an early second. We got multiple trades on here for like the 202. You can get Deebo for a random 25 first. I don't know necessarily if I'm wanting to pay a random 25 first for Deebo Samuel right now, Adam, but I just want to highlight the difference between what you have to pay for Deebo versus what you have to pay for Chris Olave. Chris Olave is going for Jordan Addison in a 25 first.
That's too much.
That's the age makeup right there for you. Or,
by the way, Jordan Addison's ahead of Deebo on keep trade cut for reference.
Oh my God. Oh my God, you might get Deebo in a first for Chris Olave.
Well, I mean, if you're just doing math, then the math checks.
The math is check it out.
Right. There was only one trade like in the last month and it was a lot of other pieces, so nothing directly trade-wise with these two.
Chris Olave for Christian Watson, a first and a second. And then one other little analytical nugget I want to throw in here. Expected fantasy points per game is something that I've been kind of just keeping an eye on.
Sure.
And I don't know how much it actually plays into it, but over his first 2 years of his career, Chris Olave has been a negative expected expected fantasy points per game guy.
Sure. I mean, it kind of makes sense.
The opportunity that he has, the amount of targets and routes run and deep targets, he's expected to score a lot more fantasy points than what he's actually produced for you.
It's tied to his quarterback play.
The crazy thing, too, is when I was looking at that, Adam, like catchable target rate, that's another like stat that you throw out there. How much ever stock you want to put into it. Chris Olave's was better than Deebo's was with Brock Purdy last year. It's weird.
No, for sure. Quarterback play, as far as the offense that he's been a part of, is not a very high potent scoring offense. And he's not in particular, at least from when I remember looking at the numbers. I don't know if you have it pulled up, but he wasn't somebody that was getting like absolutely peppered in the red zone, which, Mike, that's actually an interesting pivot.
It's abysmal, his red zone usage.
Exactly, which was a very interesting pivot because with Deebo Samuel, you could say, well, we don't like him getting all that running back touches. But when you bring in Mike into the equation, the receptions and the rushes, basically scrimmage yards. These guys gave you the exact same picture last year. 1,117 versus 1,123. The scrimmage yards difference between the two. You're talking about 6 yards. When you factor in touches, 87 catches versus 60, but then another 37 rushes. 5 rushing touchdowns was what Deebo had on the ground. That's what Chris Olave had through the air. When you bring in Deebo's receiving touchdowns, that's another 7. So we're at 12 versus 5. And to the point of quarterback play, it's not just that he's not getting targets in the red zone, but they're not even anywhere near the high-powered offense that this San Francisco offense is. I've heard stuff that they're trying to move Deebo, but they've obviously not done it yet because they're not going to be fetching anywhere near what they think they should be. And for right now, projecting him in this Frisco offense, the way they've been using him, even with McCaffrey feasting, this is a guy that on the ground giving you a pretty decent little floor when you're looking at that many touches and some of them being in the red zone.
We talk about what if Deebo's dealt, right? And what's that situation look like? It's obviously probably not as good as San Francisco. What if we played the other side of the what if coin? What if he stays and Brandon Ayuk goes? And now they're down one big
Absolutely.
target.
Absolutely.
And it's not like Deebo's not getting his fair share even with Brandon Ayuk there. I mean, a 22% target share last year with George Kittle and Christian McCaffrey and Brandon Ayuk. And Juwan Jennings is no like slouch as just a good NFL wide receiver, but obviously not for fantasy purposes. He's going to get some looks too. What if it's the opposite of what we think? It's funny that we're recording this as the day that the Brandon Ayuk TikTok video thing gets released.
Of course.
With him and Jay Dato say that they don't want me back. So just maybe we could have Deebo of a couple years ago when he was putting up 20 fantasy points per game. In all reality, here's the one thing that I really do worry about Chris Olave, and it's weird that it's kind of come full circle. I remember on the draft stream, one of our first one we ever did, me trying to sell you on Chris Olave. We had Jay Rich on. He really sold me on Chris Olave, and I bought in. Here's an unhealthy trend in comparison that I don't really like because I feel like I've been far too in on this guy and a truther for far too long, and it's just never happened. And here we are approaching the end of his fantasy relevance, and it's Terry McLaurin. Always going to hover right around that 15, 14 fantasy points per game, always going to be somewhere in that back end wide receiver 2 conversation, and we'll always be making excuses about quarterback play. And it kind of feels like we're going to get there with Chris Olave. Terry McLaurin's another guy who red zone usage has never been elite. He's never really threatened to be a double-digit touchdown kind of guy. All I'm saying is with Chris Olave, if he's going to fetch these prices, this is why I did a sell video on him not too long ago, Adam. People love him. And if you want to go out and explore him, maybe the off-brand of Deebo Samuel ain't a bad option. We just saw the Jordan Addison thing. I like that little nugget you threw in there. Jordan Addison in the first trade for Chris Olave. Why not trade out Jordan Addison for Deebo Samuel and actually get the bona fide fantasy production?
Absolutely. I think the thing with Chris Olave too is obviously there's this big ocean of age versus production and how they convolute each other and how it convolutes values in Dynasty. The thing about Chris Olave being a top 10 receiver, even if you want to say it's by a hair or whatever, because there's a tier of starting with Chris Olave at wide receiver 10 all the way down to wide receiver, 15, right? So even if you say he's kind of in that mix, for him to be in that mix, the problem is you're going to have to see sooner than later, probably in the next year or two at minimum, the production start to become a lot more consistent. So for example, when you talk about a guy like Garrett Wilson, you can debate whether it's real or not, but there's a change at quarterback and there's scenarios where you can say, all right, if this happens right now, the wish casting even for Chris Olave to give you production at this price is starting to feel really scary. So not that he's not capable of being a good target earner, but there's a lot of things in his profile for him going into year 3 for me, which are like, I don't have enough security in Dynasty value to offset this type of production difference when you can go so much further down. Like Deebo's the person we're using here, and that's wide receiver 32. But to your point with Jordan Addison, if you would have wanted to prefer to stay in that youth category, why not just pocket the first and stay with someone young? Or if you want to go ahead and get production, there's so many different options, I think, with Chris Olave. But you brought up 202, Mike. I think another thing to consider is, now that if you've already had your rookie draft, a lot of us have, what you use in that 201 to 206 range. These guys are ahead of Deebo Samuel on Keep Trade Cut. Keon Coleman, Ladd McConkey, Brian Thomas Jr., Xavier Worthy. If you can go down from any of those guys, get a plus, even straight up, some of them might not be bad. His teammate Ricky Pearsall is wide receiver 39, so a 7-spot difference. You telling me I can put a third attached to Ricky Pearsall? Things like that I think are very interesting to keep in mind with Deebo. I get it. He's injury prone. There's been problems with him staying on the field. He's 28, going to be 29, but we acting like this guy's a dinosaur? I mean, come on. He's 29 at the end of the year. Guy probably still has 3 years of solid production to bake in, not accounting for injuries, obviously. So I just don't understand the Deebo hate as well as the Chris Olave gigantic love.
If any of your league mates are slaves to the Keep Trade Cut calculator, go explore, right? I just punched in Chris Olave for Deebo Samuel, and it told me I had to add a 25 late first to Deebo Samuel. So the math is mathing.
Yeah, the math is mathing. I think that if someone was to offer Deebo Samuel and wanted to get to Chris Olave, the perception difference right now is probably in that first range. Maybe if it's not quite a liquid first, a couple of seconds, a wide receiver value that's roughly in the first round range. Anything like that, I don't even care if it's start 9. It doesn't matter. It's not really format dependent for me, to be honest with you.
You make it even more of a winner if you just sub out the first for Keon Coleman.
There you go.
Keon Coleman and Deebo. 2 for 1.
You can slice this value up any way you want to. Keon, Ladd, any of those type of guys, if you want to attach that to Deebo, and that's how you get the Chris Olave, I'll take the 2 for 1 on that every time. The thing is, for me, Chris Olave is being valued a lot closer to the elite guys than I believe he should be, which is probably why he's such a great name brand to explore trading out of.
You can get Trevor Lawrence straight up for Chris Olave. Just go off the Deebo subject here for a minute. Think about that in a super flex league. Allegedly, I have yet to see it, but if you got a trade where you stick Chris Olave for Trevor Lawrence or Dak Prescott or whoever in a super flex league right around there, let us know. I'm going to get spicy with these.
You see in just average startup value, ADP, it's the 303 versus the 307. So startups are reflective of this. I looked at a couple ones where, believe it or not, Mike, Chris Olave went ahead of Trevor Lawrence. Now, T-Law, another polarizing one. Some people are still very in on or very out on at this point in his career, but I think that makes it interesting where you could see it 1 for 1.
For the cost of a 24-year-old Terry McLaurin, I will find out. I put that bad juju on him, Adam. Before this drops, you could go out and maybe see if you can't get some Deebo?
I don't have a lot of Deebo. I might explore it. I think the thing is right now, in best ball leagues especially, I probably am a little more okay. Like, there's so many receivers in best ball in this range. I think there are some of my lineup leagues, though, Mike, definitely should be taking a little peek on Deebo Samuel, because I think he's someone that you start every single week from your roster. If he's injured, you already know that. Leave him on your bench. Like, you kind of can get away from who cares and all about the what if and the injuries department for me.
Funny, he's kind of like a running back, ain't he, in that sense?
Sure is.
Or when he's healthy and starting, he's in the lineup. Yep. If he's not, if he's banged up, all right, maybe not. Maybe not this week.
And while he's healthy, the usage he gets is honestly, it's kind of hard to replicate. Not saying that there aren't guys that get that type of opportunity, but the fact that he gets those goal line touches sometimes and rushing, and even if it's not the goal line, we've seen this guy on some of these end arounds just take off in like 20, 30-yard runs to the house, and he's so hard to tackle in space. I think definitely a guy that at this type of price you should be interested in acquiring.
And he gets used downfield enough too,
for sure.
It keeps defenses honest like that. I always remember those little plays San Francisco would run where they run them on like what looks like is going to be a short crosser. We're going to give Deebo the dump off on a short crosser, and then he just darts right down the middle of the field. And then they hit him over the top.
Over the top, yeah. And I mean, with Deebo, I think also he benefits, and as does everyone else on that team. There's just so many options that you can't focus on them all. So Deebo is not going to be able to get anywhere near the attention from defenses, the coverage that he probably likely would anywhere else. I've had problems with the injuries, but Mike, when he catches the ball, there's no way to deny that he's a dynamic player. It's just impossible.
I'm with you, man. I'm gonna go try to sneak some Deebo onto some teams here.
Yeah, see if you can get buck wild. Go get you some Deebo. You know, go steal just like Deebo would. You know, if you know, you know.
Let's go steal just like Deebo would. I love it. If you like what we're doing here, make sure that you subscribe, drop a like, and drop a comment. Let us know. Deebo Samuel, name brand, off brand. Is he disrespected as the off brand? Should he actually be the name brand? I think there's a case. And by the way, this is the second show we've done. Me first, now us together, telling you to sell Chris Olave. I don't know if we have to do a third, Adam, but we might. Maybe people still haven't got it yet.
We might. You never know. We might sprinkle a third one in there just to let you know. We'll see what the community does, but let us know down in the comments what you think of these two. We'll see you back here next week for another name brand off brand. We're out of this thing. Peace.